Sara, thank you for flying in to Beta Coast. Tell us what your context is, where you've flown from, what you do, and why you've chosen to spend a few days in Šibenik.
Thank you for having me. I've flown in from Dubai, so I moved there about a year ago after spending 12 years in London and then 5 years in New York. I'm from the States originally, but I am known for working with companies to help them refine their positioning and build their growth foundations. So I talk a lot to companies about growth foundations. So do you understand your customers' jobs to be done? Do you know what category you're pitching in? And do you know how to build messaging and identity that connects with the tribe that you're trying to pitch to? So I've worked with brands like Zoe Health, Flo Health, and Incident.io, more on the B2B SaaS side, but lots of others across Europe.
So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because in the gap between selling my first SaaS business and joining Paddle, I ended up doing a bunch of fractional work. And it kept coming back to, do you understand your customers intimately? And have you got a message that matters? And it blows my mind that people often want to go to product first and build something different, or they want to put some top of funnel campaign that's working in a different way. They want to find a hack or a trick. And yet a lot of the success you've brought to those companies has been thinking about who that customer is, what other problems they've got, and how you can go and serve them. Maybe you can take us into that Flow journey. When did you join Flow? Many of our listeners would have heard of Flow, but maybe for those who haven't, just briefly introduce it. And what did you find as you walked in the door?
Yeah, so Flow is a period tracking app. By the time I joined in 2021, they'd been going for about 8 or 9 years. Product-led growth, very product-focused organization, which meant that they built a really great product, great business. But growth was sort of flat, and the CEO had me come in and said, do we do a rebrand? What do we do to kickstart our growth? And I said, Dimitri, the best place to start is with the data that you have. Flow has, Flow being a period tracking app is helping women understand when their next period is coming so that you feel prepared. Like that's very basic on the hierarchy of needs, but then, there's all of these other problems that through understanding your period, we can help solve. So sex drive, menopause, perimenopause, acne. And so when I sat down with Dimitri and tried to answer this question with him, I said, women are spending thousands of dollars on other things adjacent to period tracking. How do we steal market share from dermatologists, sex therapists, all of these other categories? And how do we build a marketing engine that helps us test into those categories to figure out what other topics can we scale and what can we build into the product?
Love it. So take us through how long you were there and what happened in that period. But yes, the outcomes, but also what you did. What did you change?
So I was there for about 18 months. And in that period of time, we took revenue from 35 million to 112 million, 240 million customers to 360 million customers. So it was a huge period of growth. But, step one of joining an organization is you have to understand not only how the marketing team works, but what the product team is building and understanding customers first and foremost. So we started really by looking at the data that we had in the app. There's a great feature called Secret Chats where women are just having conversations in the app, asking questions, asking very personal questions. So we could understand what pain points were we not addressing with the content or the features that we already had. And then there's a content library with thousands of articles from doctors and scientists, so super credible content, right? Not things that you find on Google necessarily. And so we mined that content to understand, what content was converting at a paywall. And so we took those 2 data points, the Secret Chats questions and then the content that was working really well. So I spent a lot of time in product and a lot of time in the data science team to understand, from a quantitative perspective, what was working so that we could go to, the 60 million active users that we had globally and decide who do we have conversations with so that we can understand the psychology of where she's spending her money, what other solutions she's trying, so that we can feed all of that into the marketing engine. So we had 20 different hypotheses on other adjacent categories and problems that we could solve. We built a creative strategy and meta creative engine to produce 500 ads every single month in 60 different markets to understand which of those ads could scale, which could kickstart growth in the business. And we refined it around 3 different topics that were growing the business. And it really fundamentally changed how we were positioning ourselves in the market because most women were comparing us to Apple Health, which is free,
Yep.
and Period Tracker, very original name, which is free, right? If you're in a category of apps that is commoditized, then how do you build perceived value? You start, thinking outside the box about how do you build a product that's delivering value for things that aren't just period tracking.
So the outcomes clearly were significant. How much of what you did there do you think can then be modeled in other companies too? Where do you find an app and you think, we could just 10x this business by thinking about all of those tangential opportunities?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, like starting with the customer, interviewing customers, but looking at the segmentation first, like who is driving the LTV in the business and what other problems are they solving through other products and services. And I think that helps you figure out where can we become more differentiated and how can we build a better product. You'll see dozens of fitness apps that exist today that are running the same ads on Meta of, we're recruiting 20 women who are entering menopause to start on a 14-day journey. Like, because we can now vibe code anything, there's commoditization everywhere. And so I think it's useful to understand the jobs to be done. It's also really important to figure out, like, what is the differentiated value that you're actually bringing to the market? I think with Flo at the time, our prediction was better, our content was more reliable and trustworthy. We were working with doctors all over the world to produce really great content that women could trust. And so thinking about what is the differentiated value that you're bringing to the set of alternatives that people are testing out is really important to understand so that you can shout about it. So it's understanding what's your edge, what's the thing that's different about you versus the other solutions that they're trying, I think is quite important.
So in a world where everyone can build, and sometimes your competition isn't just other apps, it might be your users are vibe coding their own app to solve the problem, maybe even their own period tracker, we've seen that.
Yes.
How do you think about your bit of customer insight versus learning what other people are learning about their customers?
Yeah, I think it's useful to borrow from some of the leaders in the industry by scraping their ads and seeing where they're deploying the most spend, but I think focusing on the customer insight and understanding the differentiated value that you can build for them by doing research and understanding their lifestyle. What are they trying to build that you might not be able to build? What data do you have that's proprietary? What different features could you create that will help that particular customer make progress in their life? I think is really important.
So over the next couple of days, we're having lots of conversations about AI, agentic, how it's changing the world. I really believe that customer intimacy is one of those moats that has gravity. It still persists in a world where code is free, is cheap. How do you think about the growth engine of a business and what bits can be automated versus what bits are deeply human?
Yeah, having conversations with people is something that I do not think that you should automate. It was something that I observed at Flo when I joined, is that we were doing user research, but it was automated user research. And so the automated user research with templatized questions gives us good structured data. It doesn't give you the opportunity to ask why, right? And so I think if you also train people in your company to have deep, meaningful, high EQ conversations, it elevates the culture of your business, but it elevates the understanding and the EQ that someone has for the problems that they're solving for the customer. So by having those conversations live, you can then ask why, you can ask how they felt, you can dig a little bit deeper. Where I love using AI is, scraping jobs to be done from those conversations, understanding sentiment throughout that conversation to figure out what was the feeling, that was most most emotional for them. And really, how do you take that sentiment analysis and understand what can you put in an ad? What can you put into a paywall flow that's going to connect with someone more meaningfully? Thinking about the identity of the person that you're building for is really important. And sometimes you can't get that from a survey. You can't get that from even listening to a recording or looking at a transcript. When I'm having a conversation with someone, sometimes I ask them to take me through their house, to show me all the other things that they've bought, which brands do they love and aspire to buy. And you get a sense of, what box does somebody put themselves in? and what are the codes, symbols, semiotics essentially of what do we use to attract them. And in my presentation, I give this example of like you go into a shop, there's a dozen brands of water. You look at Liquid Death with a 1.4 billion valuation for water. But what they did was they took all the codes of beer drinking, right? And made a can that looked really cool so that if you go to a motorbike pit stop and you're drinking water, no one knows, right? So what tribe are you building for, and how do you use a visual identity in this day and age to distinguish yourself much more than, even in the past 5 years, UI is commoditized, branding is pretty commoditized. Actually, I see more founders investing in visual identity and brand now because that can distinguish them and make them stand out.
So we've talked about Flo Health, and I know they don't have a wearables piece, they don't have a physical product piece, but Zoe does.
Yes.
Talk to me about how that changes the go-to-market when there's a physical product that people can touch as part of the offering.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Zoe is in the early days, we really built the brand off of data, right? A lot of, when we were doing jobs to be done interviews, we realized that a lot of the people who were coming to us, they've been failed by the medical system, they're on statins, they're on metformin for diabetes, and they were looking for a holistic solution to their health. So they were going to naturopaths, they were spending thousands of dollars in other places. The really interesting part of why they were coming to us is because we were collecting data. So we took a stool sample, a blood sample, and we were actually giving them baseline data to then look at and build from. And so over the years, we've simplified the data that's being collected, and actually what the company's built, which I helped launch, was a supplement that can help people improve their gut health, and that was clinically studied. So I think sometimes having a physical element to an app experience is quite important, because if you're capturing data at one point or another or giving people a physical solution, it gives them a ritual, right? It gives them a proof point beyond just trying to get them to come back to an app every day.
Yeah, and the Whoop band is a great example of that, right?
Exactly. Same for Oura Ring.
Yeah, fascinating. So if we now think about meeting up in a year's time, and I can't predict what's going to happen over the next 12 months. Maybe you can.
I wish.
Well, actually, let me ask you that. Like, what do you think stays the same, particularly in your seat, the companies you help, looking from your view? What will have stayed the same, and what things do you think will you expect to have been radically altered by the pace of model advance?
I think a lot of the things that will stay the same is investment in Meta and creative velocity. I think how that creative velocity will be produced will change rapidly. I think in the next 12 months, we'll see a lot of bad creative as people are learning how to use AI to produce better creative. I think we'll see marketing teams building systems and infrastructure to automate a lot of process so that they can make time to connect with customers and think about their visual identity, think actually about more traditional marketing. I have lots of founders coming to me saying, we've got the performance engine running, how do I build the brand piece on top of that? And that's the piece that often is missing. And so, there's going to be, I think, more top of funnel marketing, whether it's on Meta or in other channels. And I think also brands are starting to realize that they need to become media empires. That was one thing we learned at Zoe. We built a podcast really early on with millions of viewers every single month. And we could take that content and turn it into emails and social posts. And so we learned very early that distribution is important.
Well, thank you for coming to Be the Coast. Thank you for what you're sharing.
Thank you for having me.
And I look forward to being in Dubai sometime soon. I'll have to host a dinner for consumer app founders when we're there. Hey?
Would love to.
Cool. Thank you, Sara.
Thank you.